They also receive 2.5 hours of parent training in the home environment and anywhere between 5 and 17.5 hours of one-to-one services. It's in addition to, so it is optional. I think it's important to note here, and what sparked the topic of my presentation, that we do not have an entrance criteria for our children who are enrolling in a treatment spot. So all that we require is a diagnosis of autism. So when we have 6 different classrooms, with 6 children in each classroom with a diagnosis, we are encountering individuals displaying various symptoms of autism. So we encounter the entire spectrum, including those who do acquire spoken language and those who do not. It is known in our field that the vast majority of individuals on the spectrum will acquire spoken language, but there's still a small percentage of those who don't. I think this poses a lot of questions for me in particular because I supervise children ages 18 months to 2 years. So at the time of enrolling into our program, more than likely due to their communication delays, they're not yet talking. The first thing a parent is going to ask me is, will my child talk? Unfortunately, our research hasn't shown us what particular profile of individuals will go on to acquire spoken language, so I don't have the magic 8-ball answer to help give parents a clear or concise response. But what we can do, and what we're getting even better at, is using evidence-based tools to tailor the interventions to fit the unique needs of the clients. The trajectory for each individual might just look a little bit different. So what does the research say? These researchers looked at different skills within an individual's repertoire to determine the impact on language development, if any. They looked at things such as joint attention, imitation, play skills, presence of stereotypy, and whether or not an individual had at least one spoken word, whether it was used functionally or not, at the time of entrance into the study. What they found was that individuals who were exhibiting lower levels of social skills, along with limited play skills and high rates of stereotypy, did not go on to acquire language. And therefore, those who had higher levels of social behavior, such as joint attention and imitation, lower rates of stereotypy and more play skills, along with the presence of at least one word, remember it didn't have to be used in a functional context, did go on to acquire spoken language. But overall, the consensus was that more research needs to be done. We still have a lot of exploring to do. So as I mentioned before, there is a small population of individuals that remain what we call minimally verbal, and that's between 10 and 30%. This article was just published in May of this year, and these researchers compiled all of the most recent literature on minimally verbal individuals to come up with a consistent definition. They said that individuals are considered minimally verbal when they're independently using between 5 and 20 functional words based on naturalistic language samples and or parent reports. That means individuals using less than 5 words functionally are considered nonverbal, and individuals using more are considered verbal. So let's do a little activity, and I think the setup is perfect for this, but if you're at a table alone, maybe pair up with someone, or just listen, but I have the McDonald's menu posted here. So what I want you to do amongst yourselves is pick an item to order, and for the first part of the activity, I do not want you to use any words at all. You cannot talk. So you can gesture, you can use eye contact, or you can draw. You can't write either. And I want you to order something off of the menu. I also want you to add an ingredient or remove an ingredient. So you might want extra cheese with no tomatoes. So go ahead and give it a try. I shouldn't hear you talking, no cheating. Like a fun game of charades. All right, so maybe you got as far as to complete your order, maybe you didn't. Now go ahead and pick something different off the menu, and this time you can't talk. So go ahead and order something. Can't talk this time.
This is
All right, which way was easier? Talking, not talking? I think we can all agree talking is ideal, right? We can get our wants and needs met pretty fast. We can talk faster if we're in a rush. We can talk slower if we need someone to really understand what we're talking about. And our two participants today, at the time of entry, were nonverbal. So you can kind of see from their perspective, and they have to rely on their eye contact or gestures to get through their day-to-day. It can be pretty frustrating. This is Junior at your right, and Miss Evie, bottom left. Junior was the first participant that I did this intervention with back in August of 2014. Evie came along a little over a year later, and I had a case of deja vu because Evie and Junior share very similar profiles. They were both 2 at the time of intervention. Their strengths include their play skills. They were able to complete tasks with a clear beginning and end, and they also had pretend play skills within their repertoire. They were also good imitators. They responded to their name. They could identify familiar objects within their environment, and then they were also able to respond to 1- and 2-step instructions. But now we get to their challenges. So they had an intense desire for control within their daily routines and activities. Although they could follow 1- and 2-step instructions, it was totally up to them whether they wanted to or not. Due to the control that they desired, it was very hard for us to even approach them and embed other types of learning opportunities to expand on their current repertoire and teach them new skills. Another challenge that they faced was their communication skills. So they were limited to a couple of gestures and eye contact. At the time of entry, they had 1 spoken word each, but it was not used functionally. So Junior liked to pick random words from Wheels on the Bus, but it was never in the context of singing Wheels on the Bus or requesting for a bus or requesting to sing for Wheels on the Bus. It was usually when he was wandering around. Evie had, her word was M&M. She was a big fan of M&Ms, but it was never to ask for an M&M. It was never to label an M&M. Again, she would usually just repeat it when she was engaging in play or wandering around. So despite many efforts, we were not able to get those words that we heard under stimulus control.
So those 1 words that did not serve a function, did you put that on execution or did you still reinforce it function?
We did not reinforce it unless there was intent behind it. So for example, if we were outside at recess playing with Junior and he was wandering around, no one was nearby, but we heard him sing a Wheels on the Bus, pick out a word, we would not reinforce it. So why do we want to target their spoken language? Well, the intensity of problem behaviors that they were using instead of appropriate communication led to isolation from their peers within the context of the classroom, as well as a decrease in learning opportunities. Like I said, due to the control that they exhibited, we weren't able to get in there because it just resulted in a bunch of problem behaviors. It was also extremely difficult, stressful, and time-consuming for us as the service providers and for caregivers to determine what their child wanted throughout their day. Using appropriate social communicative behaviors results in a safe environment for peers, siblings, and parents, which is ideal, as well as what we just talked about, that using spoken language is ideal as well. It's the fastest way to get what we want. Technology is great, but I don't know that anyone would agree that that would be their first choice if we can get that spoken language from a client. That is our top priority. So here's Junior's baseline communication data. The x-axis represents the date, while the y-axis represents the percent. The blue line depicts the percent of communication opportunities in which Junior responded with eye contact only. So like I said, that was one of his strengths coming in. Baseline data indicate he was able to respond 40% of opportunities, so that's where we started and we strengthened that. The red line depicts the percent of opportunities in which he responded with a vocalization. His data shows us that he was responding between 10 and a little under 40% of opportunities, which is pretty stable, but low. Especially with the last 3 data points, you can tell are extremely low, so we knew we had to change something that we were doing. In this video clip right here, you'll see the clinician is offering Junior one of his most preferred snacks at the time, a pretzel. So models the word pretzel, and that's what we want him to respond to with an open mouth sound that is not a cry or a whine. In this case, he gives us a lot of screeches. You can tell he's extremely frustrated. He actually gets up and flops out of his chair. Our hypothesis was that due to the intense desire for control, we needed to address that first. So what we took a look at was Junior's ability to respond appropriately to implicit and explicit demands. Implicit demands are anything from just the approach of an individual, because my participants were really good at sniffing out when a demand was about to be placed, and what's the best way to expand on a child playing or learning, right? We usually ask them to demonstrate something, which is a demand, essentially. So implicit demands were anything where we didn't directly address Junior, but there was still the suggestion of a demand, versus an explicit demand where we would specifically address him. So Junior, it's time to sit down. As you can see, his data is a little variable, but it does end with the last data point at 0% of appropriate responses, which is the perfect place to put in our intervention. In this video clip, you will see Junior is in our free play zone. The expectation in our free play zone is for children to find a toy and to play with it appropriately, so that way we can expand on their play skills, their social skills with the different peers in the classroom, or on their communication skills as well. Junior had a tough time finding a toy sometimes, so that's what the clinician is going to identify as she approaches him. So she's going to ask him to find a toy. On the way over to the toy, you'll see him screech again and flop. And then about 5 seconds after getting to the toy, he realizes that it's actually a pretty cool toy.
Yay! Like a safe place. Yay! It's like a safe net over here. Where's Junior? There he is. Peekaboo. Alright, come on. Let's go find a toy. Perfectly on fun. Oh my god. Uh-oh, Roland. Alright, you can play with it for a little bit. Here you go. Swipe it. No worries. I do. Cool. If you, oh no, yeah, you have to swipe it.
So that is Mr. Junior. Now we get to Evie. So Evie's baseline data depicts the same as Junior. This is her communication baseline. Baseline data for her represented that she was responding to the communication opportunities with eye contact, about 27% of opportunities, very close to what Junior was demonstrating as well. And we took baseline on her ability to respond to vocalizations, but we didn't actually introduce it, learning what I had from Junior. So we strengthened her eye contact, but we refrained from introducing the expectation of the vocalization to insert the intervention that I'm going to tell you about, and then introduce that expectation. In this video clip, you'll see me playing with Evie. We're in a therapy room, so it's her first day with us, and I pull her to do some language probes. We're playing with fish and a net. I gain control of the fish after she drops it, and what I'm looking for is to see if she will give me an intentful vocalization, and instead she just tries to pry the fish out of my hand. And then she's our bolter of the two participants, so she bolts to the door to let me know that playtime is now over.
Oh, up high, down low, help you. Oh, you just got it. Here's the fish.
Not having it. And then we see her baseline data on her appropriate response to those same implicit and explicit demands, which was just under 40% to about 10%, which is a really nice decreasing trend. In this video, you'll see the same bolt. So she is in the free play zone, the same clip that you saw with Junior. She's playing with a pretend play pot and a piece of food, and the pot folds in on itself. So the clinician who's videotaping decides to help her expand and show her how to play with it. But before the clinician can even get her sentence out, Evie kind of tosses the pot behind her and bolts to another cohort of peers and a clinician.
Hey, finish putting our puzzle away. I like how you started to clean up. How about I help you? I want you to do it away because you can answer it out. You're all about your train. We can drive our train over. Okay, you can leave it like that and then. Oh my gosh. That means you leave the train. Do you want to put it while you put it away? Okay, let's put our train away.
So what do we do about this? We created the intervention called the No card. The goal was for participants to use appropriate communication in the form of an exchange of a 2D picture card to escape those implicit and explicit demands, along with just the presence of individuals and undesired items or activities. We used a repeated A/B design, and I already went over the measures that we used for baseline. We did add one additional measure for intervention, which was the percent of opportunities that the participants exchanged appropriately, because that indicated to us when we could systematically fade our prompts and build independence. So here's our operational definitions for the no-card intervention specifically. The appropriate exchange. We wanted the participants to hand the 2D picture card to the communication partner with an absence of problem behavior. Later on, we also wanted them to follow the demand within 3 to 5 seconds with an absence of problem behavior. So we actually accomplished both, and I'll get to how. So here's our procedure. We systematically faded our prompts in order to help gain independence. We started with physical prompts, then we moved to verbal prompts, last gesture prompts, until the participants were able to independently exchange. I think this is a good time to bring up what we call non-negotiable demands. So by this time you're probably thinking, what happens when the 2-year-old soils their diaper? That's not negotiable, right? You have to change their diaper. So what we did was we sat down with Evie's team and Junior's team, including the parents, and we made a list of daily demands that Junior and Evie would not be able to escape from, that usually surrounded health and safety activities such as diaper changing, dressing and undressing, teeth brushing, so stuff like that. When these demands were presented, we did provide a reinforcer as we were placing the demand. So Evie loved her M&Ms, therefore we took out M&Ms and only gave her access to them during non-negotiable demands. So that way, her motivation to get those M&Ms was extremely high, and it competed with the option to exchange. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So when it was time for diaper changing, we would hold out the diaper and the M&M. Say, Evie, it's time to change your diaper. Here's your M&M for doing so. And she would get the M&M as she was on her way over to change her diaper. This is what the note card looked like. It was a laminated piece of paper with Velcro on the back, and then it was Velcro to a rubber bracelet. And here is some videos of our teaching. So in this first video, it's our first teaching phase with Junior. I love this video because it shows that the teaching phases doesn't just start out as smooth and seamless as we would hope, right? Junior still engages in some pretty intense problem behaviors. He actually makes it out of his chair, and they have to put him back in order to follow through with the exchange. The second the clinician goes into prompt, he has no idea what's going on, right? He has no association yet of what that card means. Then I fast forward to 3 or 4 exchanges later to where you can see he's already starting to understand that, hey, I exchange this 2D card and I get out of the demand. This is so cool. So let's take a look.
Free play or no? No, you don't want to. No, you don't want to go to free play. Free play or no? No, you don't want to go to free play. Okay.
So he was learning the expectation. Now we're going to jump to our verbal prompts that we use. So in this video, you will see the clinician present Junior with an undesired item. It's a random straw that we are going to assume he does not want. So she will offer, do you want the straw or no? So that's the only type of prompt that she's using at this point is the verbal.
Junior, do you want straw or no? Oh, spin the spinner. No, you don't want the straw. Okay, thanks for giving me your note card. You can keep playing.
And then here's a video with Evie. So the clinician is going to approach Evie and offer for her to engage with a puzzle instead of the house that she's currently playing with. She'll provide the same verbal prompt to remind Evie that she can escape that demand by exchanging her card.
Miss Evie, do you want to do puzzle or you can tell me no? Colin, thanks for telling me no. You don't want to do puzzle.
And last, we'll see Miss Evie again. The clinician approaches Evie and tells her it's time to transition to the structured activity. So she has part of the structured activity materials in her hand. This time she will not say anything except hold her wrist out so that way Evie knows which hand it's on and where it's at. And Evie will independently exchange. Also notice that Evie shakes her head in response, which is very appropriate, and she just learned that through our recasts. So typically when the client would exchange, we would say no, and without even realizing we were doing it, we were shaking our head no as well, and she picked up on that. So you'll see her do that as well.
Let's go to the activity. No, that's a good one.
A lot more appropriate than where we started with. So now we have the exchange down. They're good, they've got it, they understand the concept. So where do we go from there? Because they can't escape forever. That's where we put in our concurrent schedule of reinforcement. This is very similar to the non-negotiable demands. So the clients now have a choice, which reminds me of a fork in the road. They can exchange and escape the demand, or we present them with a preferred item or edible for complying. So we let them make that choice. They are 2. We don't want to create compliant little soldiers, right? We want them to have the ability to say no. It's very typical for a child to say no to a lot of things, but we still wanted to compete with that a little bit and increase their ability to comply. In this video, you'll see the clinician is playing with Evie at her house. They're playing in the sandbox, so she asks her to sit in the sand, and then Evie gets a sticker for doing so.
Let's put sand in the sifter. You can tell me no thanks. Yeah, put dirt in the sifter like this. Cool! Wow, dude! Thanks for playing with the sifter for me. Look, here's another sticker for you. That one's the letter H. I really like how you play with me. Two of them, you got it.
So here's what we found. Participants were able to not only meet mastery of the no card intervention, but they were able to transition from the nonverbal no via the card to a verbal no. They also increased their ability to follow daily implicit and explicit demands. So let's take a look at what that spoken language transition looked like. So in this first video, you'll see the clinician present Junior with, I think it's a random piece of paper, and when he exchanges, she'll prompt say no, and he does.
Paper or no? Say no. No. Okay.
So we got that. And then in this clip, you'll see Evie and the clinician playing Ring Around the Rosie. Evie decides enough is enough. So she looks at the clinician and she says no. And the clinician immediately stops Ring Around the Rosie and they move on.
Ring around the rosy. Ashes, ashes, real. Okay. Thanks for telling me now. That was super cool.
So here's the data to support this. The blue line depicts the percent of appropriate responses to those implicit and explicit demands. The red line depicts the exchange of the no card appropriately. So again, that helped us decide when to fade our prompt. This is Junior's data. So you can see we started at the top with physical prompts, and it took him a little while to catch on. But once he did, we were able to probe him out of the verbal and gestural prompt phase because he very quickly went to the independence. After that, we moved into a maintenance phase, but he was able to not only increase his ability to comply with those implicit and explicit demands, but when he chose to exchange, they were always appropriate. And then later we just moved to a verbal no, where the no card wasn't even present anymore. And then here's Evie's data. Evie's data looks a little bit more variable, and my hypothesis was that we jumped into it about the second week after she was with us versus Junior. He was with us in treatment 3 months before we started it. So I think she was getting used to a lot of different things of the expectations of the classroom. But at the end, she was still able to increase her ability to respond appropriately to implicit and explicit demands and maintain an appropriate exchange. So it took her a little bit longer than Junior. But we were still able to get to the same end goal. So here's what we also found, which I think is the reason why everyone is here today. After each participant became proficient in the exchange, their ability to respond to various communication opportunities using their spoken language increased significantly. So you guys are in for a treat today because Evie and Junior are still in treatment with us. So I not only have my videos from right after intervention, but I have videos from about 2 weeks ago. So you can see how their language has continued to progress. So in this first video, you'll see Evie. What I really like about this, what we caught on video, is that they're playing with the same net and fish that I was playing with Evie during baseline. But this time, Evie's using her words to request for the fish immediately, and you can even see the clinician's surprised face because this was right after intervention, and we introduced the expectation to vocalize.
Ooh, you got a fish in your net. Ready? Uh-oh, there goes my fish. Thanks for putting them back. Fish. Oh, another fish. 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 Oh, ready? Boom. Fish.
And now this is Evie about 2 weeks ago. She's sitting at circle time with one of her now best friends, Cody. They're holding hands. Evie is asked to participate in circle. They're singing a Crazy Colored Monster song. So the clinician is going to ask Evie first what color monster she has. Her first response is not really intelligible, so the clinician repeats it. And then Evie, on her own, tells the clinician that she wants to sing first before she matches the picture of the monster to the book.
Judy, nice
sitting. Here's your last token.
Evie, what color do you have? What color do you have? You have purple, that's right. We're going to sing first, okay. Purple.
So she's very quickly able to get her wants and needs met. Still some things to work on, right? Some intelligibility issues, but it's a good problem to have at this point. Next, you'll see Junior. This is right after intervention as well. He's playing with the clinician. They're doing a ball drop game together, so she's able to provide him with different prompts, and And she even asks him if he wants a cookie to go down the ball drop, and he very appropriately says no. I also don't know if you guys will catch this, the very first second of the clip that I just realized, he asks a question. He says, "What's that?" And the clinician responds with, "Oh, that's your friends playing next door," because he hears a noise. So that could be awesome as well.
Okay. The kids playing in the other room.
Ball. Ball.
Go fast! Oh no! Put a cookie down it?
No. Please don't tell me no. Again?
Again?
And this next clip, again, is from 2 weeks ago. I have a bag of Junior's preferred items that he's working for during circle time. I ask him which one he wants to work for, and he says, I guess the red one, as his response.
Which one do you want?
The preferred one.
I guess the red one.
The red one. Okay.
So that's where their language is currently at. And here's the data. So this is Junior's baseline data again. You can see the scale break at the very bottom, which is where we put the expectation to vocalize on hold, and then we reintroduced it once he became proficient with the exchange. So you can see that the last 4 or 5 data points are all above 90% of opportunities that he's responding. And again, this was back in August of 2014 versus the video you just saw 2 weeks ago. And the same for Evie. So we didn't even target the expectation to vocalize with Evie until after the no card intervention, and she was immediately able to match at responding above 90% of opportunities as well. So they are both, to this day, using their phrased speech to get their wants and needs met. So here are some limitations. We did not conduct formalized preference assessments. So when we used the reinforcers for those non-negotiable demands, and when we placed the concurrent schedule of reinforcement, we didn't do any formalized preference assessments. We just went based off of some parent report and observations. But I think it's important to consider. We did not conduct this with participants who engaged in severe aggressive behavior. And then I also think it's important to note that it did allow participants to escape the majority of daily demands during teaching phases. I think that was something at first that was a little nerve-wracking for me, because when a client first enrolls in our program, you want to jump in there, you want to get in, you want to show lots of progress. So it's something that I really had to come to terms with. So I think it's something to, again, it's just to consider. And future directions. Right now, Evie and Junior are not exchanging the no card at all, but I don't have any data to support that, and they kind of just faded themselves out. So I think if I'm going to replicate this again, I want to continue to follow their progress to have the data to support that as well. I also want to include a social measure. You saw Evie holding hands with a peer at circle time, and that was not happening during baseline due to her avoidance and the control. It was hard for clinicians and then for us to get it even. And we're pretty predictable compared to other 2-year-olds that she was surrounded by, so she wasn't making any friends. Same with Junior. He now calls his friends by name to get their attention, to ask them to play with him. So I think that just goes above and beyond what our expectations were. This intervention, I think, fits a particular profile of autism, and I think that's, again, future research to be done. Evie and Junior both had the intense desire for control. They both had one spoken word at the time of entry. It was not used functionally. So I think that's something, again, to consider and for us to do more research on, similar to the research articles that I pulled up as well. Here are my references and my contact information. I have business cards and a couple more copies of the presentation if you'd like. But please feel free to ask me any questions now, or if you think of any, you can send me an email later.
And maybe I missed this. The lead, using that note card to vocalize, did that just come on its own?
Yes, so we had hypothesized that it would happen, but especially with Junior, we had no idea. that we were going to get that, but Evie and Junior did start doing it on their own. And that's when we took it and went with it.
And I do have another question, just to back up a little bit. When you were talking about those prerequisite skills that they had coming in, if you don't have those, this technique can be challenging for parents because they want to hear the talk. They want to
Yes.
have the vocalizations coming out right away. Don't have the don't have eye contact, if they don't follow instructions, it's really tough. And you have to work on those prerequisite skills. Focus on those.
Absolutely, and I think that goes back to the intervention fitting a particular profile, because and especially since I do work with such a young age, that's what we establish first. Is do they have these prerequisite skills, or do we introduce spoken language until the skills are newer, or that's where we start those that are back down. Yes.
I wanted to ask, how did it end up going with the non-negotiable tasks? Because that's, my son is very, he needs control and he needs transitioning to those activities. Did you find that you had to change the reinforcer over time, or did the single one used only in those instances continue to work, or?
We did change them, so I think it's good to look up the different reinforcement properties. So you want to make sure, for example, that the client or the child is deprived of the reinforcer. So if Evie never got M&Ms except for diaper changing time, that was a sure thing for us. And Junior's big thing was cars. So the Dollar Tree was great because you could go collect as many cars as you want, and it's new in a box. So you have to think a little bit outside of the box, and I can't say for sure that it was perfect every time because they're two, but it got us through. So it was more helpful than not. So definitely look up the different reinforcement properties to make sure that you are hitting everything to make sure that it will be as effective as possible. Yes.
Was there any particular reason why you put the no bracelet on the clinician's wrist and not on the child's wrist?
We just did not want to run the risk of them taking it off and losing it or it being aversive. So I don't know actually if Junior Evie would have allowed it on their wrist. I do know some kiddos are sensitive to that though. So we just decided to choose the clinician because we were also then pairing ourselves with that card because our presence in itself was pretty aversive. We were the ones delivering the demands, so they did not like us.
They wanted us to go away.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else? No? Yeah. Evie did prior to enrolling in treatment with us. Junior did not. We were his first treatment center after the diagnosis. But Evie had about a year under her belt when she came to us, and I remember during informed consent with her parents, they told us good luck. Because they said everything had already been tried, so good luck. Yes?
Did the baseline skills assessment for either of them include your coworkers?
It did in other assessments. We have a ton of assessments that we do. I just picked the data that we had collected for that specific one, but they were not able to.